So climate change is another one of your interest areas and where you are looking from a Rocketship.vc point of view.
Right.
So, okay, decode climate change for us. Let's just shift from space tech to climate.
So I think the most common question people ask about the climate change is it real? Is this something that's made up, whatnot? And
Yeah.
I think, at least from most people's perspective today, this is a settled question. I think climate change is real. It's well past any historical norms or seasonal changes that, at least in recorded history, that we have been able to see. And so change is happening, and change is happening more rapidly than we expected. What this is doing is actually two things. One is it is causing a whole lot more disruption than we previously anticipated. Wildfires, larger weather events. These are all disrupting people's lives way more. And so we need to address this. If we are to continue to live and expect the same quality of life on this planet, we need to address this. The second, and the often less talked about aspect, is a lot of this is spurring change that is actually much more cost efficient, much more economically efficient, much using of less resources. We never had the impetus before to go to these directions or think about these things as rapidly as we need to, but today we are being forced to, and that actually is changing the way.
So you're saying there is business sense to do work in this space?
Absolutely. In fact, while the problem is very real and we need to solve it, the business is not too far behind. The simplest example is EVs, right? I mean, it is costly today to produce an EV, but if you look at it at a operational running cost, EVs are way more efficient than gas or petrol engines, right? Now, the cost of creating that EV needs to come down close enough and beat, and it's very close at this point to beating a regular car. But once that happens, why would you want to have a regular car?
Yeah.
And when the EV is actually cheaper, better, faster to operate. So I think that transition is happening in certain areas, but soon I think it'll happen in a lot more. And one particular idea that I've been excited by, we haven't had the opportunity to invest in this idea, but I've been excited by, is something as simple as concrete. Here in India, we use concrete a lot. The rest of the world, more steel construction than concrete construction, but India, we use concrete a lot. Making of cement is one of the biggest causes of carbon dioxide being released into the atmosphere. So there are now ways in which you can create sustainable concrete that actually locks in all of this carbon dioxide and produces equal, if not harder concrete. Imagine if we have that. Not only is India transforming itself in terms of its infrastructure, it's now going to be building it in a much, much more sustainable way. I think that changes the equation significantly, and I'm very excited for that. The other area that I'm very excited for and I think needs to be solved is water. We are humans, we can starve for days, weeks without food, but we can't survive without water. And water is still something that we have not had good, reliable access to for the entire planet. And so ways in which we can get clean water, I think, are very important. And we are seeing a lot of innovation in that area as well.
Like, do you think it's something like a government and a private player partnership, or do you think that startups and private companies need to do a lot more work here and then?
So this one's a little harder to answer. Space at least had a reasonably clear way of thinking about it. There was a lot of capital involved and whatnot. Climate change is, I think, much more immediate in impacting people's lives. I mean, people are going to suffer a lot from floods and hurricanes and whatnot, and governments need to act.
Yeah, because the impact at scale that the government machineries can create is something that private players might not be able to create. Right?
That's true, but I'm also talking about the fact that the negative impact is very real and very immediate. And so whether they can do something or not, they have to be seen to be doing something, right? And something has to be done. People cannot be suffering from flooding all the time, or earthquakes, or wild weather events, or high temperatures and whatnot. So I think governments need to act. The challenge with governments is how they choose to act. Whether can they be the place where innovation happens and they come up with a solution, or they create the environment in which private players come up with solutions. And I think in climate change, the second method is less likely to succeed in certain areas and more likely to succeed in other areas. So for example, in terms of changing how we create policy and construct roads and infrastructure. That is, I think, very much something governments should be involved in. But examples like a new kind of energy efficient air conditioning or water, those I think government should set standards, but then private companies can very much go ahead and solve that.
So the innovation can happen in the private space.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there are certain areas which are very large capital expenditure, but also very necessary to be able to directly protect or impact citizens. Those are places where governments need to act directly. Where innovation, I think, can happen over a slower sort of pace, but more importantly, there's something that private companies can innovate on their own. I think governments should support.
Do you think governments are doing enough world over?
Oh, absolutely not. I think the answer to that is very clear. In every climate conference that we go to, enough is not being done. We make promises, we're not doing it. And I think part of it is also this unevenness with which the globe is treating climate change. I live in the US, and the US is the largest polluter in the world, right? And the US is also the largest market in the world. Are we spending enough not just to clean up our own emissions, but clean up the emissions that we have historically put out? No, right? So it makes sense that all nation states needs to start stepping up and doing not just what they can, but way more than what they can, because they historically have contributed to this problem.
So there's a debt.
So there is a debt. There is absolutely a debt. But unfortunately, this debt is so large and so enormous and politically not very conducive to conversations about that people don't want to or can't, from a political perspective, solve for these things. So I don't think nation states are doing enough. I don't think countries are doing enough. But at the same time, I think the urgency is increasing.
There is talk at least.
There is.
Is it fair? Is it fair to ask developing countries to focus here, because the developed countries have done their bit, and now there is a lot of talk about should we focus on solving the core problems first, and is it fair to demand developing countries to put a lot of effort on climate change?
It's a controversial question because I think there's many nuances to it. So the Western world, where so-called developed countries have solved some of these problems, they've reduced greenhouse gases going on. Should developing countries be still replicating the old methods in which large greenhouse gases are going out? No, but does that mean that they're able to immediately switch all of their national infrastructure to clean burning fuels and non-polluting things? No, as well. So unless the people who are demanding or advising this transition are able to offer support and benefit or even technology for free to make this transition happen, I don't think it's fair to make that request. At the same time, is it fair to at least advise the country saying, hey, look, this isn't the right solution? I think that's at least fair enough to share their expertise, saying, look, we experienced this, so we have changed our own way of operating, and therefore you can learn from us. That I think is okay. But I think most developing countries have learned that lesson way faster than the developed world has. I mean, I don't know if many people understand this, but when I was a kid, we were recycling pretty much from day one. I mean, I don't know, there's a kabadiwala would come and take all of your newspapers and cans and bottles. Recycling is not a new concept for us when you're in an environment. Right? So I think we as a developing world have been very conscious about how we use our resources already. But at the same time, we have certain constraints of our population and our geographic location that we are not able to get to where we need to. So I think it's just a matter of time, but we will. And we will come up with our own Indianized solutions that will help us transition.